How are we doing today, my lovely children? Today's lesson is on using the midpoint on the coordinate plane. So our learning targets are to use inductive reasoning first to determine what is the midpoint formula, and then after we know what the midpoint formula is, use it to find the coordinates of the midpoint of a segment on the coordinate plane. So in the activity before this, we define midpoint as a point that's on a segment that divides it into two congruent segments. So the point in the middle of two other endpoints. So right here we're going to follow these steps to explore the concept of a midpoint on the coordinate plane. Alright, so in this table below right here, I want you to write the coordinates of the endpoints of each of these segments that you see on the graph. Okay, so just write them in the blanks. The endpoints of so the point of A is going to go right here, point B will go there, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, then after that, use a ruler, okay, or just kind of eyeball it, see if you can figure out where's the midpoint of that segment, where's the point that's in the middle, and then write the coordinates of that in these spaces right here. So go ahead and pause the video, take some time, and fill out that table right there, and then we'll go over it. So hopefully this is what your table looks like. So those are your endpoints for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and then here's what the midpoints would be when you look at the table. So that's what you should get right there. Check those, make sure you got them. Now let's look at number 2. Use those coordinates that you got in this table, okay? And we're going to compare the x coordinates of the endpoints with the x coordinate of the midpoint. So look at the x coordinates of the endpoints and see how they compare with the midpoint. All right, and then see if you can find a pattern in there with all the points. Okay, so when you compare A and B and the x coordinate of the midpoint, what do you see? Same thing for C, D in there. There should be a pattern that you'll find. And then do the same thing for the y coordinates. Okay, so compare the y coordinates and see how those compare if you see a pattern. Remember, the x coordinates are the first coordinate points, and the y coordinate is the second one. So that's where you'll find those. Okay, then after you look for those patterns, all right, go ahead and unpause and see if you got it right. All right, so pause it, give those a try, and then we'll see if you can figure out the patterns. All right, so hopefully you're able to determine that the x coordinate for the midpoint is just the average of the x coordinate for the two endpoints A and B. So if you do 2 plus 2, right, add them up and then divide by how many there are. There's 2 of them, so 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Same thing happens for these x coordinates. If you average 5 and 11, you add them up and divide by how many there are. There's 2 numbers, so you divide by 2. 11 plus 5 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Same thing for this one. Add up the x's, divide by 2. 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Add up these x's. 8 plus 14 is 22. And divide that by 2 is 11. So hopefully you're able to notice that if you just average the x coordinates of the endpoints, it'll give you the x coordinate of the midpoint. Same thing happens for the y coordinate. Okay, the y coordinate of the midpoint is also the average of the y coordinates of the endpoints. You can see that right here. 2, you're looking at the y coordinate. 2 plus 6 is 8. Divide that by 2 is 4. 7 plus 7 is 14. Divide that by 2 is 7. 1 plus 5 is 6. Divided by 2 is 3. And then 4 plus 0 is 4. Divided by 2 is 2. So hopefully you're able to notice those patterns. All right, now let's go ahead and look at number 3 right here. See if you can use those patterns that we found in item 2 to write a formula that'll help us find the coordinates of the midpoint M if it's a line segment where the endpoints are x1, y1, and x2, y2. So you're going to use, in your formula, you're going to use x1, y1, x2, and y2, and see if you can write a formula for the values of the midpoint, for the coordinates of the midpoint. So pause the video, see if you can give that a try, and then I'll show you the answer. Look at how we find this formula. So we said the pattern, okay, what we saw in the pattern was we took the x coordinates, right, and we added them together and divided by 2, and that gave us the x coordinate of the midpoint. And then to find the y coordinate of the midpoint, we added the y coordinates of the endpoints divided by 2, and that gave us the y coordinate of the midpoint. So what's the formula, right? So that's the question. If these are our points, we don't have numbers now, what would we do to these to get the midpoint? Well, you do the same thing. We add the x's. So we'd say x1 plus x2. And then what did we do after we added them? Well, we're averaging. So we divide by 2 because there's two numbers. Then you do the same thing for the y's. We would say the y coordinate of one endpoint plus the y coordinate of the other endpoint, and then divide it by 2, and that'll give us the y coordinate for the midpoint. So this is our x coordinate, and this will give us our y coordinate. So we can just put a comma between them and put parentheses around that, and that'll be an ordered pair for the point that is at M, the midpoint. Okay, so that's the formula that hopefully you were able to figure out. Now let's look back at the chart and verify this formula. So let's think about it. If we add the x's, divide by 2, all right, so we've got x plus x, 2 plus 2 is 4, and then divide it by 2, that gives us 2, the x coordinate. And then for the y coordinate, 2 plus 6, right, the y's, 2 plus 6 is 8, 8 divided by 2 is 4. Awesome. So if we look at the table, we'll see that this formula works for all of these points. Okay, so now in the next part, part 4, we're going to use the formula to find the coordinates of the midpoint M of AC with endpoints of A is 1, 4 and C is 11, 10. Okay, so I'm going to do that one for us, and then I'm going to let you guys try some. So we've got A is 1 is the x coordinate, and C has 11 as the x coordinate. So we're going to plug those in for x1 and x2. So we'd say 1 plus 11, and then divide it all by 2, comma, and then do the same thing with the y's. 4 is a y, and 10 is a y. So we'd say 4 plus 10 divided by 2. All right, and that should give us our midpoint. 1 plus 11 is 12 over 2, and then 4 plus 10 is 14 over 2. All right, so that's what we get. Now let's simplify that. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So the midpoint of AC, point M, should be 6, 7. So that's the midpoint right there, point M. What can you conclude about segments AM and MC? Well, if M is the midpoint, think about a picture of it if we just drew it out. All right, if this is A and this is, this is A and this is C, right? And we found midpoint is M right here. So they said, what can you conclude about AM, which is this, and MC, which is this? Well, if M is the midpoint, we know AM is congruent to MC. They're the same because M's in the very middle. All right. So real quick, do just what I did. Use this formula, and let's see if you can find the midpoint of these. So find the midpoint of these 4 pairs of endpoints. Let me get them up there so we can see them all. All right, so do your best, find the midpoint if you're given these 2 endpoints. See if you can do for all 4 of these, and then we'll go with the answers. Okay, for A, you can see the work right here. Your answer is 3, 4. 3, 4 would be the midpoint. For B, your midpoint is 0, negative 1. For C, your midpoint is negative 5, negative 1/2. So we won't put it as a decimal, we'll just leave it as a fraction. And then for D, your midpoint is negative 3/2, positive 1/2. Again, just leave them as fractions. So you can check your work out there, see if you got it right. Let me know if you have any questions.